and welcome to episode 358 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and listeners, we've done this somehow every year since 2015, a year-end episode, which is typically among the least retro episodes of Retro Encounter, since we talk about only the most recent 12 months of games. But we're continuing that. Random Encounter, one of RPG Fans' other podcasts, did a look ahead to 2023 episode about a week or two ago. So now we're doing our version of that, a retroactive look back. But who's joining me on 2022's version of our year in review episode? They are John O. Logan.
Hello.
Zach Wilkerson.
Hello.
Tom Cox.
Hi there.
And Audra Bull.
Hiya.
Audra, Tom, Zach, Jono. We have a gigantic list of 2022 releases here. It is 3 pages long, and that's after I made some cuts to get it onto something a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, there were a few games released this year, eh?
Yeah, the quantity was not a problem here, and I don't think quality was really a problem either, because there was a lot of excellent stuff getting released. And yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the quantity and diversity here. But this episode could be 7 hours if we talk about every game on this list, even if it's just a vague memory of Tom writing it for a news post or something. But so we're not going to do that. We're going to whittle this down to 10 or so, where each of us picks 2 as discussion topics. And we'll go over those 10 favorites, not a real organized top 10 or anything, just a somewhat slapshot 10 that we really, really liked, and then maybe a speed round at the end, just to give us a snapshot of how we feel about 2022 in video games. But I picked on you already once. Tom, starting with you, what's your sort of overall impression of how 2022 went? What was your 2022 in video games like?
Honestly, I think going into 2022, we expected some really big games like, Zelda, Starfield. There was even like sort of hopes that Final Fantasy 16 might make it out. And obviously, they've all been delayed into 2023. But I still feel like we had a lot of really strong releases this year. Maybe they weren't quite as big as some of those names I mentioned before. But, we had remakes that we never thought would happen, like Live Alive, and some great indie games, and also just some standard, great AAA releases.
Yeah, there were some more expected releases and some nice surprises as well. At least that's true of me. But Audra, same question to you. What was your impression of 2022 in video games, and how did it go for you?
I thought it was a lot of quantity and quality. There was quite a few fun games to play, and I never really lacked for having a title to try out.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote something like 3 reviews a month for the full 12 months. So you had plenty of new things to play.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. But Zach, your turn.
So, I mean, I think I played more new games this year than I have in a while. And it's because there are a lot of games that really appealed to me. I mean, I got to play a tactical RPG for the first time in a while that I actually enjoyed. It was the year of Xenoblade. And I think that there was a lot that I wanted to play that I didn't get to play, and like some late year releases, which I'll talk about later, that were really good. So it's not necessarily looking as packed or amazing as next year does, but I had plenty of games this year that I enjoyed.
I am very excited about a couple games next year, but that is the topic of the Random Encounter episode from a little while ago. But speaking of Random Encounter, we have one of their hosts here, Jono. Looking back at 2022 once again, how did you think the year went for you?
I think it was a damn good year for video games. I think that if you look at the conversation online, you have people saying, oh, it was terrible, and other people saying, oh, it was good. And that just depends on their personal tastes. Personally, for RPGs and adventure games, I thought it was a terrific year. We not only got some outstanding titles, some really great surprises, but we also got some announcements this year for games that are coming up next year that are really exciting. So in terms of like general buzz, excitement, studios finally catching up with the COVID-19 backlog I imagine that they had, it's been a good year. It's been a good year for me in video games. I spent a lot of it chipping away at my backlog, playing some games that I've wanted to play for years. Thank you to Retro Encounter for that opportunity in a few cases. So yeah, I had a really good year.
Yeah, I 2 things commenting on what you said, Jono. I think that you're right that we have a little bit of a COVID echo happening. A bunch of games that probably were going to come out in 2020 or 2021 got delays. and 2022 to a degree, like maybe was a slightly dense year because it had some delayed games finally coming out as people started to get a better handle on the pandemic. But and also talking about personal backlogs, this is one of my most prolific years I've ever had playing video games. And I don't know if any of you follow me on social media, but I've been documenting all the games I played this year, and right now I'm at 45. So, and by the end of the year, probably
Not
can get to
bad.
47 or 48. So, like,
Oh, wow.
with more than 80% of those being backlog, I did knock out more backlog than usual this year, which is a bit of personal pride for me. But
That's pretty damn good, Sollosi.
I also probably bought more than 40 games, so that's not helpful, really, in the long run.
Yeah, that's the problem with working on the backlog, is while you're working on the backlog, more games are coming out that get added to the backlog, so it just kind of zero sum by the end of the year.
Oh, it's not a zero sum; it's a negative sum. I am fighting a losing war against my backlog.
It's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. But I mean, I guess it's my turn for the same question. I thought this was an unusually good year. Like I like Zach. Sometimes I'll measure years in. Is this a Xeno year or is this a Final Fantasy 14 year? And sometimes like a certain game will dominate my attention span for a large portion of the year. But because there's one game like that happened for me, but I did sometimes lose track of what year it was because it wasn't an FF14 year, and I know those are always the odd numbered ones. Yeah, there was a lot to enjoy this year. I'm not sure I liked any game that I played as much as my favorite games from 2020 or 2021, but that's just personal bias seeping through. But there were so many good things that RPG Fan has dozens of reviews and features and podcasts giving the highlights, but today we're going to give our own version of those highlights. So does anyone want to go first with putting a game forward to the for the Midnight Society?
Sure, I can. And one of the more obvious choices, which is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So I reviewed Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for the site, and I gave it like a very high score. Game of the year almost certainly won't be out by the time this posts, but without spoiling anything, let's just say Xenoblade Chronicles 3 did well on both our and our reader's choice, and it's there for a reason. I mean, it's a remarkable game in terms of, I'm playing Xenosaga right now, or I just finished it recently, and just watching how like Takahashi develops as a game designer and Monolith develops as a game designer, and seeing it all kind of come to a head in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, where you have one of the best stories they've told, and some incredible highs. You have combat that is fun and fresh and accessible to a person who maybe isn't as into MMOs as someone like me, and the exploration's fantastic. It feels like sort of like the culmination of Monolith's work in a lot of ways, and like they're going to kind of step away from that and do maybe something different from here. And so I think that it's certainly worthy of being in Game of the Year conversations. I know like Elden Ring certainly is also its own thing as well, but it's a remarkable achievement in gaming, and I loved it.
I as an aside, I think I should mention we are in a bit of a Xeno month right now. I mean, we did a Retro Encounter episode on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That was a very enthusiastic spoiler cast that went on for over 2 hours. And also we've been playing Xenosaga as part of a Retro Encounter with 2 episodes on that having just released. And I was regretfully unable to finish Xenosaga in time for the podcast, and it was the first time I failed to finish a Retro Encounter game in about 2 years. So that's even more shame on my family's name. But we're having a Xeno moment right now, and like everyone that puts time into Xenoblade Chronicles 3 really, really likes it. I've hardly seen an unkind word about it, other than maybe people complaining about its breadth and how it maybe has a little bit of tedium in a way that every JRPG has a little bit of tedium. But I mean, this is a almost universally praised game. Has anyone else here on the panel played it?
No, unfortunately, the Xeno games are on my backlog. I really thought about trying them this year, but Chronicles 1 has not been going on sale. It's been very stubbornly remaining at full price. So when it goes on sale, I will download it and I will play it. But until that point, probably 3 is going to be a ways away for me.
Yeah, they're on my backlog too.
Much like Jono and Audra. On my backlog, I did feel I was missing out when, like, everyone was all hyped up about it. But yeah, just like Jono, waiting for that sale on Xeno 1.
Oh, that's weird. I guess I have the second most Xeno on my resume of the crowd here. I played and completed the first Xenoblade and really really love it, and I've played I don't know, maybe half of Xenosaga and around 80% of Xenogears, and thought they are good but flawed. But I mean, regardless of your Xeno feelings, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, a universally acclaimed banger, and like Zach said, it did very very well on our Game of the Year feature, which is going to post soon.
Yeah, I mean, I have very few negative things to say about it. The ending fumbles a little bit. I don't know. There's some tutorials that are a little annoying, but it just hits like some incredible highs. Like we're talking like near automata level highs that I think it's worth playing for anybody. And obviously, if you've played 1 and 2, it's better, but it's not really that meaningful to have played 1 and 2 for 3. Not in the way that I think 1 and 2 kind of live together. So you could just jump into 3, but 1 and 2 I think are both worth playing, especially 1 for most people. I like 2 a little more than most, but yeah.
I am thinking of playing Xenoblade 2 and 3 in 2023 because I've had 2 for several years and had difficulty getting into it, but want to give it a chance again. And I received Xenoblade 3 as a gift very, very recently. So I have both of them ready to roll. We'll see how I manage my time in podcasting in 2023, but I would like to get into those very soon, especially since I genuinely loved Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It's probably my favorite Wii game. But that was Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Thank you, Zach, again for bringing it to our attention, as it will also have plenty of commentary when the proper Game of the Year feature rolls out. Do we have someone else that wants to put down a topic?
Yeah, actually, I'll go second, and because I'm going second, I will pick Horizon Forbidden West. Because Horizon Forbidden West is forever second. I don't know if people know the history, but Horizon Zero Dawn came out a few years ago. It came out, I think it was a week before Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So clearly one of those games was considered Game of the Year and the other wasn't. And this year, the exact same thing happened with Forbidden West coming out and then Elden Ring coming out the week after. So this is the Horizon series is sort of the perpetual bridesmaid instead of a bride kind of game. But I think fans of the series really, really love it. And I count myself among that. Earlier this year, I knew Forbidden West was coming out, so I wanted to catch up. So I played Zero Dawn, and my plan was I was going to take a break between the two games because they're big freaking games, but I just fell in love with the world. I fell in love with the style of gameplay. I really fell in love with the character of Aloy, so I just moved straight into Forbidden West right after I finished it, and I did not regret that decision. Really an amazing game, I think. Astounding world that they created. It's a beautiful open world with some really, really show-stopping locations in it that really do just make you wonder at the beauty of this post-apocalyptic landscape. The character of Aloy was deepened quite a bit for this game, really delving into the insecurities that were hinted at in the first game, and her ability to bring people to her and draw people to her cause, combined with the fact that she is a incredible loner and just instinctively rejects help because she needs to do it all herself. So watching her struggle with that throughout this game was excellent. Absolutely stunning looking game too. Like the graphics in this game. We had a brief discussion pre-show about how graphics in the last few generations have, started to level off, where games that are beautiful, like on the PlayStation 3 era, can still be considered beautiful now. Forbidden West, I do think, takes it up a little bit, a notch from Zero Dawn. It's just a stunning looking game. Brilliant engine, brilliant combat, and I really, really liked it. I know I might be in the minority here because Caitlin isn't here. And Caitlin would be defending this game ferociously if she was here. I'm just going to say that it was one of my favorite game experiences of the year. I think it was just fantastic. And I really, really hope that when they release the third game that they get a little bit more luck with the release date so it's not overshadowed for the third time.
Yeah, I think both of them came out in February of their release year, right? Because because I mean my birthday's in February, and I remember both Horizon games coming out close to my birthday. Well, one of them on my birthday exactly. So, yeah, bad luck with those February release dates. But I mean, I'm mostly glad that Guerrilla Games is able to make a game with some color in it finally, because there are two games before Horizon were the Killzone games for PlayStation 3, and those are gunmetal gray and post-apocalypse brown for the entire runtime. For them to make a shiny, lush, vibrant game like Horizon Zero Dawn after the Killzone games was what must have been just a breath of fresh air to their graphic designers. And background artists. I
imagine it was a big relief.
Yeah, but I've only played a little bit of the first one. I thought it was cool, but when I started taking down the mecha dinosaurs and with basically the same method every time, I got a little bored of it and didn't get terribly far. I wouldn't mind revisiting it because it is a very beautiful, cool game, and I mean, a very green, beautiful post-apocalypse full of robot dinosaurs is just a fun concept to say aloud in the sentence. So I'm not uninterested. I don't know. There's too many video games is really what it boils down to. But Tom, Zach, or Audra, do we have any other Horizon fans in the house?
Just like you, I've played a bit of the first one, and I like the premise, but I seem to remember something else came up and I sort of put it down. But from my understanding, like the new one, rather like the other one, is like it's one of the most like graphically impressive sort of on the system. I remember when Horizon Zero Dawn, sort of like seeing the trailers for that on PlayStation 4, like that was mind blowing. And then like looking at the new one, it seems to have sort of done the same thing, which is definitely sort of a compliment to Guerrilla Games.
Sorry, Tom, did you just euphemistically refer to Breath of the Wild as something else came up?
I mean, I think that's appropriate. So.
I mean,
you would. I'm a little surprised at Tom.
If you were playing it at time of release in 2017, that's exactly what could have happened.
To be fair, I don't think I picked it up until a bit later. I think it was a couple years later.
Okay, because I love the first game, but I am totally with you in Breath of the Wild, blowing it out of the water.
Oh yeah.
I've played about as much Horizon as both of you, but I do prefer it to Breath of the Wild, so there's that.
I played only a little bit of it too, but I liked it. I want to go back and finish it.
I don't know how Zach was at the exact same time right and wrong. It's blowing my mind.
I mean, Zach is maybe the most visible Breath of the Wild disdainer among staff, especially now that Rob Steinman is no longer part of RPG Fan. If you guys ever hang out, you can complain about your opposing NFL teams, but then bond over how overrated Breath of the Wild is.
That's fair.
But to make it clear, I really enjoyed Breath of the Wild. It was like the first game I bought for my Switch later that same year it came out. And I had a very nice time with it. I mean, but when it came to green open worlds released in the same part of 2017, I did prefer Breath of the Wild to Horizon Zero Dawn. And Forbidden West is, I mean, a lot of people really like this game. I mean, Caitlin likes Horizon and Aloy so much that I think she's written multiple features about either the character or the series.
She has. She wrote the Asexual Representation RPGs feature a few months ago, which we did an episode of Random about, actually, and Aloy featured prominently in it.
Caitlin is very outspoken about how much she enjoys Horizon, and I mean, I guess the world's slightly more beautiful for having these two gorgeous games in it, because it's the thing that I think was most striking about them to me was their visuals when I was playing the first one and reading and watching things about the second one.
I think that was the drawback that a lot of people had. The big drawback to Zero Dawn compared to Breath of the Wild was Breath of the Wild, you could climb anywhere, and in Zero Dawn, you could climb where you were allowed to climb.
Yeah, there was invisible barriers at times, which people don't enjoy in the 2010s and 2020s.
And they've mitigated that to a degree in Forbidden West. There's still, you can't climb anywhere, but you can climb a lot more places. It's much more, it's the game design. They're just two different philosophies of game design. That was what it comes down to. And Breath of the Wild just kind of won out on that front. And Elden Ring apparently won out on the front of this year. That being said, still a remarkable game.
Small tangent here. So many games have you have protagonists way too good at climbing. Maybe I should blame Uncharted for this or something, but like now that I'm in my mid 30s, when I see characters climbing and taking falls, and my wrists and back hurt just watching them.
I have a hard time getting out of bed, so
yeah,
I understand.
So when half of the games have people able to hang from a ledge from one arm and then jump to another ledge, I'm just watching this going, this is impossible. Video
it's
games
called a power fantasy, Sollosi. Being able to get out of bed in the morning, it's a power fantasy.
Oh boy. Well, anyway, all right. Maybe it's definitely time to move on to the next game. Audra or Tom, do you have something you that's a good discussion point for us in this part of the episode?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I think 2022 we saw a bit of a resurgence for like the tactics or strategy genre. You know, we had recently Marvel's Midnight Suns, like Mario plus Rabbids, even Tactics Ogre Reborn. But I think the one that stood out the most to me was definitely triangle strategy. I think it took a lot of inspiration from games like Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics, but also did enough to sort of set itself apart. It had a really great story, really great characters. I really enjoyed like the sort of the voting system. I think it made your choices feel like a lot more like there was a lot more weight behind them, and you also felt like your party members mattered a lot more, and maybe you felt a bit uncomfortable because someone you felt was always on your side was suddenly against you. I think in general as well, like all of the HD 2D games, it was obviously absolutely stunning, but it also had really great music, and it just completely hooked me. Apart from, I think everyone sort of those first 4 chapters were a bit slow. There was a lot of words.
Yeah.
But once you got through that, I was completely hooked, and I sunk 50 hours into it, no problem.
Okay, now Tom, I know that you did not play RPGs for 20 years, like the way I did, because I know you're considerably younger than me. But the way you said, like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics, but characters can betray you left and right, and choices have real meaning. You, sir, need to play some Tactics Ogre, because triangle strategy really plays to me like Tomoya Asano's Tactics Ogre homage. It's especially the weight of certain decision points and character turns is extremely potent in that game. And Zach, you and I did some Retro Encounter episodes on the PSP version of Tactics Ogre a couple of years ago.
We did.
And I maybe it's because I have a much longer history with it. I think I overall prefer Final Fantasy Tactics to Tactics Ogre, which are, you know, 2 games that have a very clear through line and design philosophy progression. But Tactics Ogre is excellent, and Triangle Strategy again was the Asano team. Again, Tomoya Asano is the creator of Octopath Traveler and Final Fantasy IV Heroes of Light and Bravely Default, and he developed Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler with separate development studios, but as the Square Enix side lead producer on both of those games. The Asano team making a strong character-driven strategy RPG really did result in something special, because Triangle Strategy looks amazing. My girlfriend played through all of it, and she talked to me a lot about it, and so it's definitely on my list. But regrettably, this is the 3rd game in a row we've talked about that I have not played for the podcast because I was just drowning in backlog for so much of 2022. But Audra, Zach, or Jono, like, have any of you guys dipped into Triangle Strategy?
I have played it. I've gotten to one ending, and then I was on my way to another when Xenoblade happened. And so I haven't gotten back to it. But I think Tom really hits the nail on the head. And I actually prefer it. I think I was probably the most cool on Tactics Ogre of anybody on that podcast. And I think that Triangle Strategy does actually a better job of dealing with consequences of decisions you make. Because I feel like sometimes in Tactics Ogre, like, you would make decisions that would like take you down this like very particular path, but like the decision was always so minute. And I don't feel like at the moment of making the decision that you understood necessarily the weight behind it. And sometimes I feel like Tactics Ogre struggled to show the consequences of war. I think Triangle Strategy does an amazing job of showing the consequences of war. And if you want to lower those consequences, they put you in some very difficult situations as well. There's one particular fight where you really should use like these traps that are set around your town, but basically burn the town down. But if you do it without them, then you get, you're on a better path, and like you don't burn your town down, which, sounds nice. So I think it does a great job with that. I think that the way the characters are written and the way the characters are part of the decision-making process is really strong. And it's also just better balanced than Tactics Ogre, because some of those like save the character missions in Tactics Ogre sometimes like infuriated me, because I'm like,
they were
this
awful.
is impossible.
Yes.
Otherwise, the game I think is easy, except for that. So I think Triangle Strategy is a triumph in and of itself. It's an excellent game. It's the first Tactics RPG I have played that I really truly enjoyed in 25 years, or 2024, whenever Tactics came out, Final Fantasy Tactics. And so I thought it was amazing. The replay value is great. The way they allow you to have different battle strategies on replay, because like there's like level changes, is great. It's a phenomenal Tactics RPG, and I think everybody should check it out.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed Tactics Ogre, probably more than you did, Zach, when we played it a couple of years ago. My major criticisms of it were that too many battles were just walking up a death staircase into enemy lines, and also how your AI companions that you were trying to protect often had just the worst death wish.
Yeah,
or I would sometimes like paralyze or seal movement of my own characters so they wouldn't run headlong into enemies and die.
Yeah, I tried that a couple times.
On at least one mission, that's what I had to do to win. I remember specifically, but Triangle Strategy, I think, is definitely inspired by Tactics Ogre, but has learned the lessons of Tactics Ogre and is trying to make but in a modern game with modern trappings and ideas. But it's a really good one. We have 2 reviews of it on the site from Nikki and Bob, and they gave it a 92 and an 85, which is, I think, is a ringing endorsement. At least it sounds like one.
It's definitely on my backlog.
It's less so on my backlog. I like strategy RPGs, but they are not my favorite kind of RPGs. I think it looks really, really good. I have had one slightly unpopular opinion about everything I've seen from it. I'm curious if, Tom, you have any thoughts about this. HD 2D, I think, works incredibly well for, I guess, 8-bit and 16-bit style titles, where it's like, it's a 2D plane. They look like 2D games, but there's depth of field. Whereas when I looked at the graphic style when applied to Triangle Strategy, it impressed me considerably less, because games like Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre, they already took place in a 3D space. So it looked like a slightly more polished version of a PlayStation game, rather than a mind-blowing glow-up of a 16-bit game. I don't know. What do you think about that in terms of, does HD 2D work as well for this title as it does for, well, say, Octopath or Live Alive, that kind of thing?
I mean, personally, I think it did. I think there were some really, really impressive environments. I particularly like there's this one battle where you're in like a mine. I think that one in particular really stands out, and there's some pretty cool castle scenes. But at the same time, I almost think sometimes there was almost too much on screen, and it did sometimes like become a little bit overwhelming. But apart from that, I do think it was generally pretty good. I think there was a blur effect that was put on the game almost, which you can turn off, and I would recommend you turn that one off. But apart from that, I do think it definitely did the same sort of thing as Octopath did.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like the bloom works a little better in Octopath. Whereas here, I feel like sometimes I'm like, I need to see that. Can you make that clear for me? So yeah, I don't think it looks as good as Octopath, or Live Alive definitely, but I think it still worked. I mean, like Tactics Ogre originally came out in the Super Nintendo, right? So like it wasn't exclusively a 3D thing, and so I think it definitely looks more impressive than say a Tactics Ogre or Final Fantasy Tactics. But no, I definitely prefer the look of Octopath.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that Jono's outed himself as RPG fans' graphics snob of 2022. Because if the game's not as good looking as Horizon Forbidden West, I mean, just don't even push it his way at all. Obviously.
Hey, look, I'm a graphics snog when it comes snog. I'm a graphics snog. I'm a graphics snob when it comes to 16-bit style RPGs, and 8-bit RPGs, pixel art essentially, and HD 2D is an extension of pixel art. And pixel art, although there was some really, really nice sprite work on the PlayStation, I would argue that it peaked with the Super Nintendo and Genesis era. And
may I point you towards Suikoden 2?
Yeah, Suikoden 2 and Breath of Fire 4 would love to have a word.
Okay, but the thing about Suikoden and Suikoden 2 is I can almost picture those games on the Super Nintendo. Like, they did not make good use of the PlayStation hardware. Everyone back then was really trying to push 3D because that was the hot new thing. And because of that, pixel art kind of got lost in the shuffle. And that's not saying games like Final Fantasy Tactics don't look stunning or don't have really, really nice pixel art. I'm just saying that the 3D effect with pixel art doesn't look as good to my eye as it does on a 2D plane with depth. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, so I guess that closes the door on triangle strategy. Audra, what's the first game you want to bring up for the podcast episode today?
Actually, I was thinking of going kind of nostalgic and talking about Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster.
Sure, that counts. It was an early release this year. I think the first 5 Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters dropped on for PC in the second half of 2021, but Final Fantasy VI had a bit of a delay and was, I think, February of this year. Is that right?
And it was an awesome gaming experience as a result.
Was this your first time playing Final Fantasy VI?
Yes, it was. I had been meaning to. I have a lot of friends who are like, oh, you'll love Final Fantasy VI. It'll be one of your favorites. And I just had never had time to, so I finally got around to doing that, and yay.
Good. I mean,
it's just a great game.
Yeah, I consider Final Fantasy VI an unassailable classic. In my very, very biased opinion, it was not the first RPG I played, but it was probably one of the first 5 RPGs that I played. And it's it's a hugely popular game. It's a lot of people's favorite Final Fantasy, and yeah, I think of that as an absolute crucial RPG. So I'm glad that we finally have one more person that has played it for the first time.
Yes, and I know there are some issues with the pixel remasters, like the font and everything, but I mean, I would think if you haven't played it, the pixel remaster is probably one of the best versions to try.
And now those pixel remasters will be getting even more accessible pretty soon, because they're no longer going to be confined to the PC. I believe they're getting Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch releases in 2023 at a yet undetermined date. But they or do we have a release date on those?
No Xbox, but no, it's sometime in the first quarter of 2023.
I think it's June.
June? Okay.
No, wait. I think spring. Sorry, spring is what they said.
Spring 2023. See, I thought that we had a window, but I didn't remember a specific date. And Xbox isn't getting it. That's weird.
It's not. It was an issue for some people. So yeah.
Oh, you know what?
You might want to fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that I'm.
Yeah, no. You know what I bet it is. I think the Pixel remasters were Steam exclusive. So if they were going to get an Xbox release, they probably would have wanted Windows and Xbox together. So they could have possibly been on like a future Game Pass release.
I'm glad they are fixing what I think was 2021's most baffling decision in video games of not releasing these things on the Switch.
They would be perfect on the Switch. It made no sense.
Yeah, I would have preferred them on PlayStation or Switch over Steam, because I mean I don't own a Steam Deck, and I usually like playing Japanese RPGs on a console just as a personal preference. So I held off on getting any of them, because I was pretty sure they would get a console release eventually, and I'm glad that my prediction turned out to be correct. Mostly because I want to play those, and I'm gonna be checking my games budget and possibly getting all 6 on the Switch or PS5 sometime next year.
Unfortunately,
you can wait for FF2 until it's on sale.
I blew my games budget on the collector's edition because there was no choice. I saw it. I was like, I must have this.
That collector's edition is costs about as much as a Switch does, right?
Yeah. Yep. I don't even know if I'll open it, but it'll look beautiful on my shelf.
If only I had a record player, I would have thought a little harder about that. But I
Yeah.
just want to have those on a console that I can have in my living room and not confined to my desktop, because I don't even really have a good gaming laptop. I play all my PC stuff on desktop. But yeah, I'm thrilled that we're getting those remasters and those damn good remastered soundtracks on more than just Steam.
Oof, they're so good.
They're really, really great. Now, Tom, you've been a little quiet. Have you played Final Fantasy VI?
I haven't, but I do have a Steam Deck now, and that was definitely one of the games I was pretty excited to pick up on there. So I definitely plan to play it, hopefully next year. But I mean, I guess my excitement for the Switch release was a little dampened by the fact that I already had a way to play it portably.
Oh
But
yeah.
I'm still definitely looking forward to playing it, and hopefully
it
next
is
year.
100% worth it. It's
It's
an
a
all-timer.
really good game. I mean,
I've never met
it's
anyone who
timeless,
doesn't like
kind
it.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, people say it's the greatest Super Nintendo RPG of all time versus maybe Chrono Trigger. Audra would be a good person to ask about that, because Audra has 2 banger reviews of Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger on the site.
I really like them both. I think I might lean towards Final Fantasy VI slightly more, but I'm very biased towards Final Fantasy.
I don't think this is like a Coke versus Pepsi decision, because they're both so damn good that
We're all winners with them.
yeah, someone who loves Chrono Trigger or who loves Final Fantasy VI, I don't think they're ever going to argue that the other game is not brilliant.
No, they're both amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to relitigate arguments from almost 30 years ago, but I consider Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI two just absolutely crucial RPGs of that era. And you know, I would probably throw a couple of Square Enix's output, or Square's output from that same time, into the mix, like like Super Mario RPG or Seiken Densetsu 3 or even Final Fantasy 5. Or you know what, there is another game from that era that had a remake in 2022, and I think I am going to nudge that one into the fold right now, because it's my turn to discuss the game, isn't it?
Yes,
And one 2022 game that I played that's also a somewhat of a retro release is Live Alive. Live Alive was a 1994 Square game. It was the first soundtrack that Yoko Shimomura worked on for Square. She was an employee of Capcom for the previous couple of years before that, where she did the music for most of the music for Street Fighter 2 and the first Breath of Fire, for among others. But Live Alive was her first full soundtrack, and so it was a game that I was aware of for many years. Like I saw it appear on lists of like the best confined to Japan RPGs and Square RPGs that we never got, like probably alongside games like Seiken Densetsu 3 and Treasure of the Rudras and even Final Fantasy 5 before we got the PlayStation version in the late 90s. So it was a game I had known about for a long time. I did attempt to play it something like 20 years ago, but didn't get very far. But this version has just these beautiful remastered visuals and audio, a full slate of voice acting, a few modern conveniences like the hint and clue system makes a little bit more sense, and the menus are much better. Just a lot of small things like that, but preserving most of the gameplay, or if not all of the gameplay, and just in a package that just plays so smoothly and looks so stunning, that I really felt like I was playing a game at the level of Final Fantasy VI or a Chrono Trigger, that from a Super Nintendo Square game of that era, but made very easy to get into. And Tom, you and I, along with our mutual friend Wes Iliff, did 2 episodes on Live Alive a little bit earlier this year for Retro Encounter, and it was a delight talking about it with you too. So this is, so listeners and panelists, if you haven't played this, like, this is a missing classic from that era that I really felt held up very well. So yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, I think it's a remake done right. You know, I think I'd never heard, unlike you, I'd never heard of the game before it was revealed at the direct, but instantly there was a lot of buzz around it, and I'm really glad I picked it up. I don't feel that it's aged badly at all. I think, I'm sure they've given it some quality of life improvements, but generally it played really well. I had not just a great time playing the game, but yeah, recording the podcast about it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played it personally, but I watched my fiance play through basically all of it, and I'm struck first of all by the fact that I think it is the best looking HD 2D game. Like, I think that it kind of puts Octopath to shame. The way it uses color, I think it's fantastic. And I thought some of the scenarios were just amazing. Like the ninja one, like the level of um, choice you had with that, I think was really interesting in terms of how you approached it, and like how every scenario had this different way of approaching it. And I thought the ending, was solid as well. And then, it also, like, of all the games that I've ever seen played, reminded me so much of Octopath Traveler, like
Oh yeah.
what Octopath Traveler is trying to be. And so I really enjoyed watching it. And I thought the combat was cool. I think it's if I hadn't watched someone play the whole game, I would have played it this year myself, and I think it's really fantastic.
I played Octopath Traveler a couple years ago, and when I was playing it, I thought that Octopath Traveler was the Asano team doing their version of a Saga game. But then after playing Live Alive, I'm like, oh no, there's a lot of Live Alive DNA in Octopath as well. So this is, and Live Alive is a beloved game by a lot of designers. I think it was one of Asano's inspirations when he started getting his own projects in the late 2000s, early 2010s. And a very, very popular Japanese voice actor, I mentioned this on the podcast as well, Tomokazu Sugita, he's sort of a leading man, award-winning voice actor, but Live Alive is his favorite game, so he asked to be part of the project, and they gave him a minor background character role in all 8 episodes, or all 7 episodes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
As the apparent resident graphics snob, it makes complete sense to me, Zach, that you think this game looks better than Octopath, because it was built on a really remarkably robust foundation from the original version, which still looks fantastic to this day. Beautiful, beautiful character designs, world designs. The original game is, I think it's a really, really great Super Nintendo game, and they just took that and they elevated it to just an incredible level with the new graphics. I think I haven't played this yet. I have, because I played and beat the 16-bit version many years ago, which I really, really enjoyed. I'll get around to it eventually, but I think it looks like a stunner. And I mean, it sounds like it's also been a pretty big success for Square Enix. So I'll make a prediction right now that I probably will be wrong about, but I bet that this game and some of the other games have been doing so well that they will release Bahamut Lagoon or Treasure of the Rudras in 2023 in the same graphic style. I would be very unsurprised if the success of this game did not lead them to doing the same thing with their other lost SNES classics.
I think it would at least merit them re-examining that catalog and finding the best candidates for such a remake. Because I mentioned Seiken Densetsu 3, that got a huge remake in 2020 that I played 3 times in a row for the Platinum Trophy because of course I did. But I'm not, I don't know if I'm that confident in making a similar prediction, but I'm sure it's something that they're talking about behind closed doors.
It makes sense. I mean, Bahamut Lagoon, the graphic style already almost looks like it's an HD 2D, like it's a very lush, beautiful looking game with pixel art and everything. It would translate unbelievably well to this graphic style. So I would say that would be the next one to come out if I was them. But they have a gold mine here. They like the lost classic, the game that the West has never played, but released in a format that's much more palatable to today's gamers. It's a gold mine. It's a really, really smart. It's a really, really smart thing to do because you already have the game finished. You just need to give it a facelift.
I mean, and perhaps obviously, they're making more and more of these HD 2D games, so I think it has to be at least a moderate success for them. And they aren't HD 2D, but they've been re-releasing just about every 16 and 32-bit Saga game over the last couple of years.
And boy, can you imagine how thrilled I am about that?
Yeah, so mining their old catalog makes sense. I mean, we know we're getting the Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake soon-ish, although that's hardly a lost classic. That's a game that's older and had a much wider release than Live Alive did. But yeah, I would not be surprised to see more games get this Live Alive treatment going into the future. I'm not going to make a prediction and pick out a specific one, but I would not be surprised at all.
I mean, talking of games that aren't lost classics that definitely I think we'd all love to see, I still can't believe we haven't seen anything of Chrono Trigger in this sort of style.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Chrono Trigger was announced for this year or next year in this style. It's such a no-brainer.
Yeah.
On the other hand, maybe they'll just decide to do a pixel remaster of it because the pixel remasters have been so
I
successful.
was about to say, I almost wonder if they hadn't thought of that.
Well, at least Chrono Trigger is accessible. Like there, it's come
There's
out.
a lot of versions of it. Yeah.
There's been 5 or 6 versions of it over the last 20 years, but while Live Alive was pretty much confined to the Super Famicom and never had an official translation. So I think that would be a different kind of project. But I mean, a pixel remaster or HD 2D Chrono Trigger is not necessarily a no-brainer. But again, I'm sure there's discussions about it. But we have at least 5 more discussions to have take place in this episode. We're about at the halfway mark, but who wants to show off a second game for Retro Encounter 2022 show and tell?
I'll take it. So I guess my next game on the list would be Return to Monkey Island. So this is something that Sollosi is, well, not this specific game, but Monkey Island is something Sollosi is very familiar with because we had a podcast on it earlier this year during Adventure Game Month of Retro. And Return to Monkey Island, it's not just a return to Monkey Island in the sense that it's a sequel, but it's also a return of the original creators, Ron Gilbert and Dave Grossman. They did Secret of Monkey Island, and they did Monkey Island 2: LeChuck's Revenge. And then they left LucasArts, and LucasArts did Curse of Monkey Island, which was a great game. I love Curse of Monkey Island. But Monkey Island 2 ended on a pretty remarkable cliffhanger, an infamous cliffhanger that they didn't get to resolve. And the way it was resolved in Curse of Monkey Island was not how they would have done it. So for years and years and years, Ron Gilbert has said, I would love to go back and do our version of Monkey Island 3. And instead of doing that, they went in Return to Monkey Island. They address the cliffhanger and resolve it in their own way, but they also incorporate Curse of Monkey Island, Tales of Monkey Island, and all 5 Tales of Monkey Island games. And they incorporate it into like a tapestry of Monkey Island. Everything is there. Everything is quote unquote in continuity. And with this, they delivered a brand new graphic style that looks like I guess like some people say it looks like a pop-up picture book. I think it kind of looks like a scrapbook. Voice actors have all returned. It's a really solid adventure game. And not just that, they don't use the old style verb system. They have a new, much more streamlined point and click adventure game system. And yeah, I think it ties a perfect bow on the top of the Monkey Island series. I would not be surprised if they do another sequel in the future because it's kind of like, it's a seminal series. But the way this game ends is, I think, exactly how they would want to end it. I don't think there needs to be another Monkey Island game after this. And in fact, if there is another Monkey Island game, I think I might be a little bit disappointed. Because I was very, very happy with the way they ended this. It addresses a lot of things that I guess folks my age have been looking at, like, getting older and looking back on the things that you've yet to accomplish. So yeah, it addresses a lot of things, and it's also very, very funny. It's hilarious, brilliant dialogue, great performances. I was a big fan of this game. I'm really, really excited that it got released this year, and I think that if you've ever played Monkey Island 2 or 1 and 2 and 3, I guess this is worth a play. I don't think you need to play Escape or Tales to enjoy this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading reviews and news articles about this game. They didn't completely abandon the non-Gilbert sequels. Like they brought in something like a character or a concept from the sequels they didn't work on. I think it was like a talking skull or something.
Yeah, Murray. Actually, Murray's there with his voice actor. Murray's one of the best things about the post Gilbert Grossman Monkey Island games. But no, they everything's canon. What at the very beginning of this game, actually, you have the option to Guybrush essentially will walk you through his scrapbook and tell you about all of the adventures of all of the games, and they're all there. So everything that happened in those games happened to Guybrush, and this happens at some point in the future after those games happened. So everything happened. Everything is canon. And they do it in a very clever way that I think respects the developers and the fans of those games. That was one of the criticisms. They said, well, if you do Monkey Island 3, you're going to be erasing all these games from the official timeline. And these games, some of them are great. and they have their own fans, and that can be a little disrespectful. But no, they honored the canon, they honored the games that came after them in a very touching, smart way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think fans care much more about canon and retconning than most of the time, more than the creators do, because they. But there was a concern when Gilbert said this was going to be a direct sequel to Monkey Island 2 that they were going to retcon the future games, but that was not the case. And
Nope.
I heard this. I remember reading about the specific example of Murray, but so it sounds like this is both Gilbert and Grossman telling the story they want to tell while respecting the all of the Monkey Island games of the past. And if the ending is I don't know what the ending is, but if the ending is as definitive and satisfying as you're saying, Jono, that maybe this is them trying to put Monkey Island to rest finally, but in but but also in a way that is that should be satisfying for everyone involved. And you talked about the graphic style being like a scrapbook. I thought it looked sort of interesting, but that was a minor controversy when it came out. Some people really did not like that graphic style, but while it had its defenders as well. But you're on the side of good, right?
I'm on the side of very good. I think the game looks gorgeous. It just doesn't look like what people expected based on the past games. But the reality is that the difference between Monkey Island 1 and 2 going to 3 is, like, obviously there was a very, very different graphic style where all of a sudden it looked like a DreamWorks or a Disney animated movie. And then they moved it into 3D with a Grim Fandango-esque system, which tried to incorporate that but couldn't because there were graphic limitations. Then
No,
Tales of Monkey Island tried to...
They didn't give it tank controls, did they?
Oh, it has tank controls, yeah.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, it's not the best controlling. Escape from Monkey Island is the black sheep of the family, I think. It's still a good game. It's still funny, but it's not as good because it's kind of a pain in the butt to control. But yeah, they just went a different direction with the graphics, and I think they were smart to do so. I think that it really suits the game. It suits the style of the game, and I'm a big fan of this. I really, really enjoyed it. And as for the ending, you said I'm gonna retcon myself slightly. I don't know if satisfying would be the word, because I don't think Ron Gilbert is interested in providing people with a satisfying ending. It's final, but it's still, there are a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of ambiguity for the audience that the audience can then make up their minds about what's happening, which he sort of did with Monkey Island, the end of Monkey Island 2. So it's very much in his style. If you've ever played Thimbleby Park, that game ends on a similar note of making the audience question what just happened. So interesting ending, one that I really liked, but some people found it not super satisfying. It comes down to personal choice.
I don't know what the ending is, and maybe I used the word satisfying out of ignorance, but there's an air of finality to it, at least.
I think so, yeah.
Now, and Jono, you alluded to this, but I played Secret of Monkey Island to completion for the first time a couple of months ago, and we did have a podcast episode to go along with that, which you and I were both on. And I thought that that original Monkey Island, it showed its age a little bit, but it was definitely witty and creative and fun. I used a guide for the Monkey Island section actually in the second half of the game because there would have been a lot of walking back and forth out of confusion if I hadn't. But do you think this game does it have that ultra specific puzzle solving that was maybe taken to an extreme in those early adventure games?
There is a little bit of adventure game logic here, not as much. I think because of the streamlined system, there's no verbs, for example, in this, and because of that, puzzle solutions are a little bit more not logical. Logical isn't the word. Intuitive, maybe. I didn't need a.
You don't need to rub a piano playing monkey against a pump or a compass against a wall with a key on it. Nothing like that.
I hate that damn puzzle. No, I didn't find myself stumped. I did find myself wandering around the various islands looking for solutions, because it's a puzzle game. That's the point. But there were none in the game that genuinely made me feel like I was angry at the solution, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, Tom, Zach, or Audra, do we have any other Monkey Island players in the house? Because I should mention, after I finished Secret of Monkey Island, I did see the rest of the series, not including Return to Monkey Island, on a Steam sale, and got those. But what about the three of you?
I had a friend in high school who was really into it, and that is the limit of my experience with Monkey Island.
I have heard of it. I have not played them yet. They're on my backlog.
It's definitely a series I'm interested, but yeah, like the other two, I haven't played it myself.
Oh man, talking about games we haven't played but are interested in. This sounds like an episode of Random Encounter.
No kidding.
Yeah. Oh, and Tom, by the way, check your email. But you're welcome. I may have just gotten Tom a copy of Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster.
Aw.
It was on sale. Don't be impressed.
No.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you
for
very
those-
much, though. I do really appreciate it.
For those who are listening right now, the Steam sale started 2 hours ago, so it's like looking at the backlogs now. We're like, oh no, my Steam wish list just sent me an email with like 1,200 games in it.
I usually keep my Steam wish list to a tight 30 to 35.
That's
if it gets,
impressive.
Because you know I curate it a little bit because otherwise I'll just get my eyes will get way too bigger than my head. I think the email said I had 32 of them on sale.
Oh wow.
Which was, you know, concerning for my spending habits. But we don't need to talk about our spending habits anymore on this episode. Who else has a game they want to bring to the table?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. I think for me, a game that really stood out this year was a smaller indie game, but it definitely had some fanfare, and that was Tunic. It's maybe the term's a little bit overused, but it's a Souls-like with a cross with Zelda. I'd say it's very like Link to the Past style gameplay, but it sort of has almost Wind Waker art style, but not quite. But yeah, I had a really great time with it. I think it had some flaws. I think I didn't think its combat was quite, for its difficulty. I felt it was too difficult to control. I think there's a difference between a game being fair and sometimes just being a little bit too complicated. But all in all, I felt like the actual exploration elements I had such a great time just getting lost in the world, and there were so many secrets. I thought the world design was excellent. You know, I mean, who doesn't love a little cute fox character to play as? But in general, it was just a really fantastic time.
Now, here's one I have played, and I got a little bit stuck partway through Tunic because sometimes the puzzles are a little opaque, and I really wanted to try to solve them myself, so I didn't check any guides for it. But I think something remarkable about Tunic that Tom, you alluded to, but maybe didn't say specifically, is that this is a silent movie of a game. There's no dialogue, and when you even find things that are like signs or clues in the world, they're usually like pictographs or something that you have to decipher rather than straight up dialogue. And maybe the most amusing use of clue planting this game has is you find pages of the game's manual throughout the game, but not in order. So you might not even learn the function of a specific button or how to unlock a certain kind of door until you find the manual page that teaches you how to do that. And if you look up something online or have this knowledge ahead of time, you probably can do a lot of things contained in the manual before you find the appropriate page. So it has like this weird nostalgia of being a game that plays a little bit like The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, but with the sensibilities of a Souls-like game, by being very difficult and all the storytelling in the background, and if when you die you lose resources, but if you find your spirit or your corpse, you can gain those resources back, which is one of the hallmarks of Souls. But it's also not super loot heavy. Like your toolkit is not a million different items. It's a much smaller, tighter number. But even doing something like finding a sword or finding a bomb feels meaningful in this game because of how like sparse this world is, and how every advantage you get is good. Like this is a game that is a little challenging, but the action never feels unfair, and the puzzle solving feels really weird and special because of how you find clues and assemble this manual. It's like you can compare it to a Zelda game or a Souls-like game, or even just a similar isometric action game, like maybe oh, what was that game with little, like, where you control a little crow from last year?
Death's Door.
Death's Door. Like it might feel a little bit like Death's Door, a game that has a similar presentation, but it's pretty unique. I don't know if I've ever played a game quite like this before. It reminded me of like playing A Link to the Past crossed with Fez.
I think, yeah, like how you say, it is definitely unique. I think most games, they gatekeep progression through certain items or abilities, whereas what makes Tunic so special is, technically, apart from a few things, you could do, if you knew what you're doing, everything from the beginning, but it's finding those manual pages that tell you how to do something, and suddenly a whole new chunk of the map opens up.
And also, I don't know if I mentioned this clearly, the manual pages don't have a lot of written text on them. It'll show you like pictographs of what the little fox guy is doing with button presses near him. It's all very clever. And if you have nostalgia for reading through a game manual or a 90s gaming magazine, you'll have a shot of dopamine from collecting these manual pages.
Very nice.
So, Zach, Jono, or Audra, have either any of us played Tunic or are at least more interested in it now?
It's number 4 on my Steam wish list.
I am more interested, although Souls-like scares me.
But I was afraid of Souls-likes, but then I really, really enjoyed Salt and Sanctuary and Demon's Souls earlier this year, getting those off the backlog. Or I ended up buying Salt and Sanctuary, but Demon's Souls was on the backlog, and now it's like, oh, you don't need to be afraid of them because dying is okay.
Yes.
Like if just, I wish I had gotten over my apprehension about them earlier, because now I have like 8 Souls likes I really want to get to in 2023 that I definitely won't get to most of them.
And also, I mean, while Tunic is a Souls-like, I've never played a Souls-like game, and like you, Audra, I'm probably too scared to. But I think, although Tunic's difficult, I don't think it's quite as difficult as a Souls-like game from what I can understand.
I think that's a problem with the term Souls-like, is it's kind of become synonymous with any game that's hard. And that's just not what it is.
I mean, I think there are also like commonalities, like you have to go get your resources back from your dead body and things like that. So like, I mean, like I'm terrible at Souls games. Like I have Elden Ring. I really tried to play it. I sucked at it. But yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's, at least if it's being used correctly, a little bit beyond just Souls difficulty.
But like Salt and Sanctuary did scare me off Souls-like for a little while, but I don't think that's going to be the case forever. Like Dark Souls is a series that I would like to give a shot. Elden Ring, certainly I would love to give a shot.
I actually liked Death's Gambit when I played it.
Yeah, exactly. Like these are hard games, but they're not.
I just don't want to fight a battle for 400 times.
Yeah. There was a lot about Salt and Sanctuary that I passionately hated, and the difficulty was not really one of the reasons. So I think this is a game, Tunic is a game that I would really, really like to get into and play, because I'm a giant fan of Zelda, and I'm a giant fan of, like you said, the nostalgia of reading a manual. So I think this will hit a lot of my buttons.
I think Tunic does more unique things than Salt and Sanctuary did. I liked Salt and Sanctuary more than you did, Jono, but I think Tunic
That's not difficult, Sollosi.
Yeah, I know. But Tunic is, I mean, it's a different kind of challenge than Salt and Sanctuary is, but I think it's a game that plays a little more fair and does a few more unique things that I think have it stand out. Tunic's very, very good. Even though I did not finish it, I do recommend it if any of this sounds intriguing to you, because it's a game that's sort of like cute and bright, but also sort of oppressive at the same time, and has a lot of mystery hiding behind it because of the nature of clues and puzzle solving in it. It's very, very interesting and worth trying.
And also, if the difficulty does worry you, there are accessibility options. I think you can literally have an invincibility mode, or you can turn your stamina off. So there's definitely options to make the game more accessible.
Yeah, oh, that's another Souls-like highlight. Your attacks and dodge movements sharing a stamina meter. That's defining what a Souls-like is can be a little complicated. But the things that we've said in over discussing Tunic and I guess Elden Ring in this episode would be bullet points on that list. But Audra or Zach, do we have another game we want to bring up? That's, I don't know, may or may not be another Souls-like.
Ooh. Well, I actually started. I'd like to talk about one that I'm just starting to play. Well, I have been playing it throughout this month, but Marvel's Midnight Suns actually surprised me.
Right. This is a game, from with characters and settings from Marvel Comics, but made by some of the same people that worked on the XCOM games, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually a really good. I have never really played a card-based strategy RPG before, but I kind of love it. It's turn-based, but then you have like recycling options that you can do, and you can customize the characters with new abilities as you go and upgrade them, and it's been really addicting playing it. And then you insert yourself into the game in a way with the main character, and you can befriend Marvel characters, and it's just kind of fun because he doesn't want to befriend Magic. And that's a total X-Men character.
Magic with a J, Colossus's sister.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah. See, I read X-Men comics 30 years ago. I know some of these things.
Everyone wants to be friends with Magic. Magic does not want to be friends with everybody else.
No, and for some reason, Tony Stark always wants to be my friend, even though he's not a character I'm crazy about, but it's kind of amusing.
And remarkably, Magic is only the second rudest one of her siblings.
Yes.
But
she's great, actually.
Mikhail's not in this game, is he?
No.
Okay, that's probably for the best.
This game seems like it's full of deep cuts. I don't think it's quite that deep.
No, it's actually full of some. I mean, I don't know some of the characters at all very well because they're from Marvel storylines that I haven't read as much. But I mean, they're all really likable and they're fun abilities.
And hey, if you play some of those old Marvel RPGs from the early 2000s, like X-Men Legends or Marvel Ultimate Alliance, you will get some very weird Marvel deep cuts. Like they're like Sauron and Sugar Man are bosses in X-Men Legends 2. And if you have any connection to Sugar Man as a comics fan in the 2020s, good on you, because that's how I found out. That's how I found about that weirdo.
What, dude? Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah, there was a lot of Age of Apocalypse stuff in XML too. But I think Magic was in that one as well. But Audra, you said there's a player controlled character or a protagonist insert character. Do you get to sort of customize their moveset and appearance?
Yeah, you get to customize them. It's basically kind of like if you're playing a BioWare game almost when you're outside of combat. So you get to customize the character, you get to choose light and dark options, and I've been actually having a blast doing a lot of the dark options more, because I think light is actually meaner, which is funny. And you get new abilities based off of how you respond to certain characters, and it's kind of fun. You get to build up your own superhero.
So do you choose from like a starting class, or is it do they give you just a lot of freedom, sort of a mishmash of abilities to throw together?
Sort of a mishmash of abilities thrown together at first, and then you gain more depending on how you like your light or dark. Like depending on if you use light abilities, you gain more light abilities later. Versus if you were doing a dark move all the time, you end up getting more dark points. And it's actually, I kind of found it better than like the Paragon Renegade system, at least as far as alignments go.
Okay, now this is really interesting to me because again, I'm a superhero fan that goes back decades, and one of my biggest disappointments in the history of video games was the Dennis Dyack produced X-Men Destiny for PS3, which is around 10 years ago. It was a Marvel RPG where you get to be your own, design your own member of the X-Men, and you could choose to be to have psychic powers, energy based powers, or physical based powers, and then customize your moveset. And it sounded like my dream X-Men RPG following the MUA and X-Men Legends games, but it ended up being a huge disappointment. That game is not good. But
Aw.
but Midnight Suns might scratch that itch a little bit if it has competent RPG mechanics and
Yes.
some player driven choice.
Yes, it does. Actually, I was very satisfied with both. I kind of feel like it's probably the best out of the Marvel licensed games I've played recently.
Interesting.
Which, so I liked it more than even Ultimate Alliance 3, and definitely more than Marvel's Avengers.
Ha!
Sorry, Kamala.
With apologies to Kamala Khan, none of this is your fault, but your game wasn't that great.
Yes.
Most of my Marvel video game itch scratching has been taken care of by Spider-Man and the Miles Morales PS4 games. But those are excellent. Those feel like a Spider-Man version of the Batman Arkham games, which is high praise coming from me. I really like Arkham Asylum and Arkham City.
Speaking of things to be excited for in 2023.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're getting Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League and Marvel Spider-Man 2. I think is what they're calling it, unless it gets a fancy subtitle in the next few months, which are sort of continuations of those two threads. You know, the Batman Arkham and the Insomniac Spider-Man, or I should say Rocksteady Batman and Insomniac Spider-Man. So like there are some cool superhero video games to be played in 2023. But this episode of Retro Encounter is about 2022, so I'm a little bit out of hand here. But Audra, what systems is Midnight Suns available for?
I believe it's PC, the PlayStations 4 and 5, Xbox. I think Switch.
Oh, so basically all of them. Okay.
Did the Switch one get delayed?
It might have.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe they had trouble getting it to run on Switch, but which is not an uncommon problem. But anyway, that's very, very intriguing, combining multiple things that I like: superhero RPGs, tactical RPGs, card playing RPGs, BioWare-esque dialogue trees, character customization. They seem to be throwing a lot of ingredients into the pot, but something pretty tasty came out. That's very, very intriguing. Thank you, Audra.
You're welcome.
So Zach, that leaves you and me left to discuss a game for part 2. Do you have one you want to talk about?
I do. So I'm not done with this game yet, but I've been playing Chained Echoes recently, and oh my, Chained Echoes is fantastic. So I feel like it's like everywhere on the internet now, but it's developed by one guy in Germany, I think, and it is a turn-based RPG that has 16-bit graphics. That is clearly made by somebody who played and loved all the games that I played and loved in the 16-bit and 32-bit era. You can see elements of Chrono Trigger in it. You can see elements of Xenogears in it. You can see elements of Final Fantasy Tactics or Suikoden in it. But, you know, a lot of times when you're playing a game that is obviously inspired by some of those, you know, great classics, it feels like a retread. You know, not pointing any fingers at the Tokyo RPG Factory or whatever, but it doesn't do that. It knows what it is, and you can clearly see that this is a person who played those games, learned what worked best in them, and then took them and then applied it to his own vision. And so the combat is different from anything I've quite played in terms of like the idea that you have to use certain kinds of moves, try to keep yourself in what's called an overdrive gauge, which gives you, you know, more damage and better agility and stuff like that. But if you use too many, then you overheat. And so kind of trying to like play with what you're doing to keep it within that. There's amazing exploration. Like there's Xenoblade writ large all over this game too, in terms of exploring areas, and like they give you great rewards for those areas. The writing is a little bit clunky sometimes. You can tell it's written by somebody who's not English is not quite their first language, but it doesn't really matter because the story is fun. It's got great pacing. Like I just feel like at home when I'm playing Chained Echoes. Like this is the video game that I wish I knew how to make because it's so good.
This is consistent with what I've heard from other places, including Caitlin, who's currently reviewing this for RPG Fan. That review will probably be out by the time this episode is out.
Yeah, it posts on New or Christmas Day, so
Oh,
or
okay,
Christmas
so yeah.
Eve rather. So yeah.
All right,
It's a good Christmas present for the developer.
Excellent. So yeah, so we will have as we record this, we do not have a review out for Chained Echoes, but we will by the time this posts. But that what you're saying, Zach, is consistent with what I've heard. This is an excellent game, clearly inspired by classic '90s JRPGs, but made with a specific vision in mind. And not maybe not outwardly ripping off anything. It's just a good ass RPG that wears its influences on its sleeve. But I mean, I haven't heard I've hardly heard a single bad thing about this game. It like, I think I had it on my wish list when news was popping out for it, but then I'm more and more tempted to buy it, even without it being on a discount, as I hear more about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it does fun things like where it inverts the expectations you have. Like, the very first scene is like, "Get up, Glenn! Get up, Glenn!" So the Chrono Trigger, Dragon Quest 3, but then like your mom ends up slapping you at the end. Like it's really funny too. It's just like I've played 15 hours in like, no, granted I'm a teacher, so I'm off work, but I played like 15 hours in like 2 days. That's how invested I am in this game. Like, it's so fun. It grabs you immediately. It's so cool.
I am so sold. That sounds so good.
I want to play
I'm
it.
really, really interested in this.
I'm also very interested in this, but the problem is oh boy, I have so many other games on the list, but I hope to get to this one sooner rather than later, just because I've heard so many good things.
It's absolutely worth playing. Yeah, it wouldn't quite surpass Xenoblade 3 for me in terms of game of the year, but it would definitely be second on my list, at least at this point, about 15 hours in, and I can't imagine it's going to get any worse. I think it's going to get more interesting. So yeah, it's great.
You can compare this in terms of other games if it's helpful, but what's the combat like? What other games does this remind you of?
I can't really think, and that's a good question. I can't think of a lot, because like managing the overdrive gauge, and maybe you guys have some ideas. Like, it's all about like, it's basically you're either like yellow, green, or like if you go too far, you're in the red, and you want to keep it in the green the whole time. And so it is all about managing how you stay within that while also using like your most powerful moves. But if you do too much, eventually you'll go red, and then like you get some debuffs and things like that. But you also, like, after every fight, you get all your TP, which is like basically how you use your skills back and all your HP back. So like every fight, like you're throwing everything you have at it. So like even like the sort of semi-random encounters, even though you can see the enemies on the field, feel like a sincere challenge, which I can certainly think of games like that, like SMT or whatever, but it's not like SMT. I can't think of a great analog for it, in terms of all the different things it pulls together. Like it's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like it pulls all these different ideas together in terms of the types of skills. Like one character has a skill called X/, but it's a bleed ability, which is really powerful in this game. But it doesn't ever quite feel like anything else. It feels like they cherry picked like 7 different things they liked, that really worked for them, and then kind of blended them all together, and then it became its own thing.
Well, let's see. Like, restoring your resources between every battle so you can use your coolest stuff every fight feels a little bit like recent Zeboid games. But meter management is a key part of it. It feels a little bit like, I don't know, a Skies of Arcadia or a Lufia 2. But overdrawing from your own resources and making yourself vulnerable and needing to recover if you go too ham is a little bit like Bravely Default, which are, yeah, I mean,
Right.
I'm using my own gumbo definition to try and nail this down, but it's everything you say sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's again, like it's not, it's like nothing you've ever played, and it's like everything you've ever played, and that's what makes it amazing.
Oh man, you're making it hard to be fiscally responsible.
It's only $25, man. It's worth it. It's worth it. Like Alana, who's here right now, and she's playing through it, and she's a little bit ahead of me, and I was like, no, I'm not waiting for you to finish. I want to play this myself. So I dropped another $25 on it.
Another advantage of being an educator and having a full summer and winter break to play your video games.
Indeed it is.
All right, so I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your winter break and Chained Echoes. I guess I have the 10th game on the list, and there's a lot I could talk about. Maybe the most expected thing for me to do would be to go into Dragon Quest Treasures or Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. My favorite game of 2019, AI the Somnium Files, had a sequel in 2022 that I thought was good, not great. But I'm going to maybe go against type, talk about a genre that I normally don't like very much, but I played The Quarry earlier this year, and we even recorded the podcast together, Peter Triesenberg and I, right around Halloween. I should preface this with I know I've said this on the podcast before. I don't really play very many horror games because I don't like the feeling of being unsettled, and sometimes I do react in a very high strung manner to jump scares, which I've been told makes me entertaining to watch horror movies with, but I don't necessarily enjoy a lot of them. uh, so horror is not a genre that I love. With all of that said, I thought The Quarry was great because this is Supermassive Games, which is the studio that gave us Until Dawn and the many Dark Pictures anthology horror games over the last 6 or 7 years. And this is a large budget multi-character one of those that's bigger than a Dark Pictures game. So this feels like a follow up to Until Dawn for them, but it's also campy and silly and weird. It's a bunch of teens at a summer camp where one of them sabotages their ride home because he's trying to hook up with one of the other counselors. But there's also like a weird family cursed by a werewolf. By a werewolf curse, so that these 8 teenagers are trapped in the woods with a bunch of werewolves and have to try and get to the bottom of the werewolf curse. And there's a lot of snark and a lot of and a lot of sort of poking and prodding that the main characters do. So there's like the game has sort of a sarcastic tone to it that makes the dialogue very fun. And again, there's these 2 like shy, innocent teens that like each other, and I'm low key rooting for them to hook up the whole time. And but also there's this teen that's trying to hook up with a girl, and he's kind of a jerk. It has every trope of like a silly teen romance movie, and also every trope of a like crazy slasher horror movie of the 1980s, but in a very fun, competent video game form where that has so many different endings that all 8 can die, or all 8 can survive, or all 8 can survive but they go to jail because there's so many dead bodies after it all happens, or the best ending that I'm told, because I didn't get it, was everyone survives, but you find enough pieces of evidence that you can exonerate yourself by showing all of the evidence to the authorities. Like there's a bunch of collectibles and story paths and stuff that will affect your ending and your post game mini bios. That made me want to replay this game right after finishing it for the first time. But it also it has good acting performances with a few actors that you've probably heard of. There's Brenda Song is in it. One of the kids from This Is Us is in it. It's and David Arquette is one of the main characters. Sam Raimi's brother is the cop at the beginning of the game.
Ted.
Yeah, Ted Raimi, that's him. He has a major role. But this is a surprisingly well acted, campy but funny, scary but not overly scary werewolf camp adventure narrative game. And I don't normally like horror, but I thought it was super good. And so I've been monologuing for far too long. The Quarry's great. It's a great a Halloween romp, or a horror game that doesn't try to get under your skin so much as have you run from werewolves a lot. I hope that I'm selling the game okay, because I thought it was very, very fun, even though I'm normally not a horror guy.
Well, it doesn't sound like it takes itself too seriously, which is kind of cool. I know Bob really, really liked it when Bob reviewed it. Supermassive has really found themselves a good little niche here they've gotten themselves into with these cinematic style games that offer a lot of choice to the player, that really pay homage to, I guess, cinema of yesteryear. Um, they're not games that I've played, but they are games that look really cool, and considering that they come out on a regular basis, seem to have a surprising amount of polish on them.
Yeah, I think they've been
Yeah.
working on the quarry for a while now, because a new Dark Pictures game comes out every year, but the quarry is at least twice as long as one of those. And I think they knew they were onto something when Until Dawn did so well on Twitch and other streaming services. So the quarry has a bunch of like streaming features where people that are watching the game can vote on decisions, and there's a lot of multiplayer options both for in person and like couch co-op and online multiplayer. It does a lot of very interesting design flares on those fronts. Has anyone else played this besides me and I guess Bob and Peter?
I have not.
No, I haven't
Unfortunately,
either.
no.
Well, there's been a lot of that this episode, where every game that's been revealed, only one or two people have played it. But at least that got us a pretty diverse set of perspectives. Again, the list that we have here is something like 100 or 110 games. And we only talked about 10 of them, but also I don't like having a podcast go much longer than 2 hours. So I think that's what we're going to be confined to here. But if does anyone want to talk about a game that we haven't mentioned yet, just a 1 or 2 sentence hit?
I'll give a quick shout out. I think it's not a game that released this year, but Persona 5 Royal finally came to somewhere other than just PlayStation, and I think that's great. If you haven't played the game, it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's well worth playing.
Numina is a pretty good traditional indie RPG.
The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe seems like it's just going to be an expansion from the original, but it is so much more, and it's probably one of the best narrative experiences I've had in the last couple of years.
Speaking of expansions, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak is an excellent expansion to my favorite Monster Hunter game. So if you want more of Monster Hunter Rise, Sunbreak is your only option, but it's a great option. It's the game I played the most this year, with neighborhood of 140 to 150 hours.
You didn't Chronicle Rising. It was kind of a slight game, but it was a fun game, and it sets the stage really well for 100 Heroes, which is, the main show here. So I thought it was fun, and it's worth checking out.
Awesome. That's 5 bonus games that are worth checking from this list. But listeners, 2022 was a very good, very dense year for video games in general, RPGs and adventure games in particular. And if you want to know about more games that came out this year, the best place to go to is rpgfan.com. If you check the archive of reviews and features and podcast episodes, you will find all these games that we mentioned today, plus many, many more discussed in those different theaters. But one last question before we start closing up shop. Retro Encounter had about 35 or 40 episodes this year. I did take a break in the spring and early months of summer, but all 4 of you showed up on different episodes at different times. Do any of you have, not just Retro Encounter, do any of you have a favorite podcast episode that you recorded for RPG Fan in 2022?
Yeah, I was on a couple this year, but I think my favorite was the 3DS Encounter episode. It's one of my favorite systems, and it was just a really, really fun time to just sort of talk about the system's legacy.
I finally played a Tales game. So
That's
I was
right.
happy about that. Yep.
Yeah, you, Zach, and I all played Tales of Exilia for the first time, and I thought it was I've played several Tales games, and I thought that was one of the better ones.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was fun.
I was on retro a lot this year. Mass Effects were good. Okay, for retro, it would have to be the Muppet episode, though. It was just a few days ago, but it was so
phenomenal.
much fun. God, it was fun talking to you about that. I had such a good time. But in terms of the podcast that almost killed me this year, it would have been the karaoke episode of Rhythm Encounter.
Oh boy, yeah, I was on the Muppets episode and the karaoke episode, and quite thoroughly embarrassed myself both times. But I would not take either of those experiences back.
It's a tough one. I'd say probably the one that I enjoyed the most, and I I guess I hosted it, but that's not why. Was Xenoblade Chronicles 3 spoiler cast. Got some new people in who hadn't been on retro. Got some old timers back like Alana. And we went on for far too long about a game that we all really enjoyed.
Right, and oh boy, I did a lot of retro this year. I was on every single Game Journal episode other than the January one. So I think I've played like 11 games for retro the past 6 months alone. So I have a lot to choose from. Unsurprising because I'm the main host and showrunner of Retro Encounter. Oh boy, maybe this is an obvious choice, but I really liked replaying the Mass Effect trilogy. Again, I liked those when I played them 10 years ago, and they held up as well or better than my memory of them. So again, the episodes weren't that interesting because they were basically just full-throated endorsements from all three people present. But I think Mass Effect is so special, and I had so much fun revisiting it this year.
Well, I forgot about my real answer, which is the time I finally won the quiz show.
Oh, that's right. You know what? We haven't had a quiz show in a couple of months, and we've done 5 quiz shows. Maybe should I start writing a tournament of champions quiz show?
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
Just don't let former staff on because I know she'll win.
Oh no. That might be exactly the right episode for Alana to come out of retirement for. We'll see. But and anyway, listeners, thank you for joining us on a discussion of 10 games that came out in 2022, plus a handful of others. This is the last Retro Encounter episode of 2022, but we have a lot of 2023 already planned out. January is going to have 4 episodes. 2 of them will be about Ogre Battle 64, Person of Lordly Caliber. I have played a couple of Tactics Ogre games, but no Ogre Battle games. So I'm going to try and get some Ogre RTS in my hands starting next month. We're also doing an episode on RPG fashion that is probably going to be completely bonkers. I know who's on that episode, and so get ready. Just saying. And also, Tom, neither you nor I talked about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet or Pokemon Legends Arceus in this episode, so we're going to have an episode next year dedicated to just those. Pokemon had a big year in 2022, so we're doing a Pokemon episode in January to talk about those games.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
And also one last thing, we do have a Retro Encounter poll winner that let's see, the poll took place around early November, so that's something like 6 weeks ago. We had a poll for a future Retro Encounter episode in which Lost Odyssey won, and I believe Lost Odyssey is going to be a February episode. So expect 2 episodes on Lost Odyssey in February. And you know what? I'm going to drop some more morsels just because. Jono, we have not nailed this down in stone yet, but you and I both really want to play Like a Dragon Ishin when it comes out in February. So I think we're doing an episode or possibly 2 episodes on that in early 2023, probably March or April. How does that sound to you?
Oh, I suppose that I could, probably come on to talk a little bit about that particular series.
Oh, excellent. And also, while I'm talking about things I've bought recently, I bought an Analog Pocket, which is a really cool Game Boy Advance retro machine. I got it in the mail a few months ago, and I really want to play some RPGs on it. So do not be shocked if we are having a GBA month or some GBA games being played for the podcast in the first half of 2023. And Tom, you've never played a Suikoden game, have you?
No, I haven't.
And Zach, you've played all the Suikoden games, haven't you?
Once or twice, yeah.
So you know what? I am going to guarantee that we are going to, in the spirit of these Suikoden remasters and Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes coming out in 2023, let's give Retro Encounter episodes to all of those. So please expect more Suikoden and some Eiyuden in 2023.
Well, I'll be there.
Oh, I'll definitely be there.
Excellent. So, all right, that's enough talking about the far future. Let's talk about the near future. Listeners, if you want to get into contact with us, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find RPG Fan on Facebook, RPG Fan.com on Twitter and Instagram. RPG Fan has a Discord, a YouTube channel, a Twitch channel, something going on all of those just about every day. You can also go to rpgfan.com/shop to find our merch store where you can get apparel, coffee mugs, pins, phone cases, and other things emblazoned with the RPG Fan Emerald Shield. RPG Fan is also home to 2 other podcasts, starting with Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness, and mostly hosted by you, John Logan.
Yeah, Random Encounter. We just did our look ahead at 2023 episode. We had a few shared people here. Zach and Tom were both on it, and we had a really good time talking about things that are coming up.
And in addition to Random and Retro Encounter, there's also the Rhythm Encounter, our RPG music podcast. It is also bi-weekly on the Mondays that are not occupied by Random Encounter. But listeners, you can review Random, Rhythm, and Retro Encounters on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify or whatever service you prefer. Please give all of the positive feedback you are willing to give. But if you want to give us positive feedback as individuals and not as a podcast or a website, let's tell you how to do that, in which we share email or social media with y'all. Starting with you, Tom.
Yeah, the best place to find me would be on Twitter at voicelesstom.
Now you, Zach.
Best way to find me is via email, zachw@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on our Discord at zachw.
Now Audra.
Email's the best way to get in contact with me, audrab@rpgfan.com.
Now Jono.
Best way to get in contact with me is jlogan@rpgfan.com. I've also recently created a Mastodon account on mastodon.social, but I have absolutely no idea how this damn thing works yet, so I'll just have to share that in the future.
And I probably should start a Mastodon account. Maybe I can be Sollosi at Mastodon when I missed the Sollosi on Twitter by about a month when I signed up for Twitter a decade ago. But until that happens, listeners, the best way to find me individually is on Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoca for Dogs at other times, and on RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. So 2022, it's been a pretty good year, but now's the time to look ahead to 2023, and maybe I can finally finish more than one Xeno game. Thank you, good night, and good luck.